Happy Wednesday, everyone. Welcome to Prowess Project Go Live, where we help online business managers level up in their career, pivot into being online business managers, and so much more. I'm very, very excited for our guest today because she has a zone of genius and she has a specialty, but that's not good enough when it comes to business. You have to relate it to whatever the goal is of the client. And she has just nailed this. I'll talk more about it. Don't you worry. But as always, let's get started with an opener question. I want to know, what podcast are you listening to right now? Put it in the comments. What podcast are you listening to right now? You guys know I'm stubborn. I'm going to sit here and wait. What podcasts are y'all listening to right now? Mel Robbins, Jenna, that's good. Ooh, BBC News, Kate. Mind Love. I don't know that one, Angela. Very cool. I'm sure y'all have heard me say this before, but I'm a big How I Built This fan. It's just mwah. And then Built to Sell, I also love. Love Huberman Lab. Am I even saying that right? I don't know what that one is. Okay, I'm gonna have to check that one out. Amazing. We got 2 from Mel Robbins. Mel. Today Explained. Oh, so good. Megan. Oh, so good. All right, y'all. I'm Ashley Connell, CEO and founder of Prowess Project. What we do is we help women pivot in their career to become online business managers. When I say OBM, online business manager, think a cross between a COO, so you got all the strategy of how to grow the business, and a VA, getting shit done. It's the perfect little marriage. As we are training all of our OBMs, we're gathering data so we can match our OBMs with their ideal client. So our goal for this podcast, like I said at the beginning, is to bring you information, ideas, resources to help your career and your clients. And that is exactly why we are bringing on our guest today. Like I said, she has a zone of genius and an expertise that she has perfected, but she has gone beyond that and said, how do I align my gift with exactly the goals of the business, of the clients that I have? And with that, I am bringing up Ms. Megan Dougherty. How are you?
Oh, I'm so well. Ashley, thank you for having me. And thank you everyone who's here. I am so excited to chat with all of you.
Oh, we are thrilled. So before we get into even your story, tell them about your big news, your big
Well,
launch.
as of yesterday, I am officially a published author. My book released yesterday, September 10th. It's called Podcasting for Business: How to Create a Show That Makes a Bottom Line Difference for Your Company, which is all about my personal obsession, podcasts that actually move the line and create business outcomes, which I think some of you may also be a little bit interested in for yourselves or for your clients.
Bingo. So many online business managers come to us and they're like, hey, so my client is toying around with the idea of starting a podcast, or they're getting some questions about guesting, but we don't have a strategy behind it, or like, why are we doing this? And it could be expensive if we don't have it aligned. And it's all of those things. Those are the questions that we get daily. So I'm so excited to hear more about this. But before we get started, tell us about you. Give us the skinny of how you got started and how you ended up running this business and becoming a published author.
Well, I never set out to be a podcast producer. This wasn't in the game plan. I was at sort of loose ends in 2017. I think it was. I had been an early hire at an internet marketing startup, learned so much. Didn't want my whole career to be there. So I was taking different projects, experimenting with different things, running little businesses. I've always been a business idea person. And I get a call from an old colleague from that company. And she says, hey, do you want to start a business together? And I said, sure, I'd love to. And her background was in broadcast audio. And since I had all this digital marketing experience, we put it together. We started producing podcasts for businesses. And over the years, we really started developing a model and really codifying the things that we were seeing working with our client shows. We do an annual research report about the podcasting for business industry. So taking all of this learning and turning it into something really, really functional, all of which has now become the book, which is, I'm still a little like, it's real,
Yeah.
which is kind of amazing. But yet it's there and it's good and it's useful. And so that's ultimately what I like the most.
Okay, that's exactly right. So what will the biggest takeaway be for someone who is reading the book? And I don't mean like nitty-gritty. I don't want
Yeah.
that, but like they're going to come away understanding what?
The biggest and most important thing to understand, and you can even take it from this conversation that we're about to have, you don't even have to read the book. It's that a podcast is not a thing that has its own objective criteria for success or failure. It's a tool that a business can design to do specific things. And as you know, the person who's involved in the podcast, the host of the podcast, the company that runs the podcast, you get to decide what those things are. And you get to design the podcast to do those things. And it doesn't matter what any other podcast in the world is doing, because as long as it's effective for your business, then you're good to go.
Bingo, 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 underscore, underscore, underscore. So I absolutely want to go into like the different types of podcasts and how you would utilize them for different outcomes. But before I do, most all of the OBMs who are listening here or are getting into the space, they're all going to be working for micro businesses.
Okay.
Most of them are not working for businesses that are, 50 people and above. Usually it's like from a revenue standpoint, 150 to 3 million. So in that range of business, which I know is quite the range, why is it important for them to consider podcast as that tool?
Oh yeah, I know that's my favorite range too. That's where most of our clients live. It's the type of business I like. I don't like working with anyone who has a billing department. It's too big. It's too much trouble. But billing person, cool. Department, But and one of the things, and I mean, it varies, of course, by business, by industry,
Sure.
by personality type. But one of the biggest things is it's one of the most powerful drivers of relationships that you can have. And sometimes I call podcasts the magic calendar opener. So if there's people who would never give you the time of day for, a coffee chat or a pick your brain session, you invite them to your podcast and all of a sudden you're on their calendar and they have decided to give you 45 minutes of their time. And that can be huge for a whole bunch of different purposes. And then you get a whole other like host of benefits that come along with that. But really the biggest one for most businesses in this range really is creating relationships with people and creating content that the audience they already have needs. And that does a lot of other things in their business too.
Amazing, amazing, amazing. So let's talk high level. And if you could give us three different intended outcomes. So maybe it
Mhm.
is grow revenue. Actually, you would know better than I am, so I'm just throwing things out. And how the podcast strategy would be different.
Absolutely. So, I mean, I've got 15 of them. They're in the book.
Well, there we
There's a
go.
little self for you. I'll share some of my
Please.
favorites.
Yeah.
So, one that I really like, and that might be really interesting for a lot of micro businesses, is we have the outcome that we look for sales qualified leads, and that's
Mm.
where you're strategically choosing guests who are people who could be potentially become clients, and that's a type of podcast that's going to have a particular structure. It works best for businesses where there's something that you can demonstrate, teach, coach, or otherwise work with them on the podcast, because that gives you a built-in follow-up that you can turn into a sales conversation. This would be different than, for example, let's say a brand awareness style of
Mhm.
podcast. That's another metric you can optimize for. But in a brand awareness style of podcast, you're less solving problems for an individual and more sharing your IP and your ideas and getting them out there. And that's going to be a really
Mm.
different structure of podcast. You're going to promote it in different ways. You're going to use it in your business in different ways. Both can be really valuable for the business, but they have to be really different podcasts, because something that's great at developing sales probably not going to be great at developing your thought leadership. It's just a different type of show. And so the way that you think about it and the strategy that you employ for those different goals is going to be really different. There are different outcomes that can work really well together, but sometimes there are conflicts, which is why it's a really good idea to think through the logical outcomes of all the decisions you're making about the show. And if I do this, will it also do that. And that's kind of the level of thinking you should be putting it in as someone who's advising clients or who's managing a podcast. Something that we see a lot with shows that we take over. For example, someone's like, I want, this is for thought leadership. I want everyone to know me and my brand. So I'm going to spend all day interviewing other experts about how brilliant they are. And that's the podcast. And that's a great relationship building podcast, but it's not a great thought leadership podcast because none of your own content is getting out there. And so you really want to be thinking about what you're sharing and what you're doing with that information and how it's impacting your business and your ultimate goals.
That is very true. I hadn't thought about it like that. You're right, where you are sharing less of your IP and your genius and more of inviting other people. So one question I did have was your first example, how you would use that as a sales tool for potential clients. Can you explain that again? I didn't quite grasp it.
Absolutely. So this won't work for every business, for example, but there's one show that I really love, and it's a YouTube podcast. It's called Caleb Hammer Financial Audit. That's what it's called.
Okay.
And I don't know if he's using the strategy. I don't know the guy. I just think it's a great show, and it's a great example of this use case. And what he does is he has people come on who are bad with their money, and he audits their budget, and they talk about their finances and how they're using their money, and they make a plan for how they can do better. And that leads into some really cool products and services that he has for sale. So when someone gets off that show, and he's probably not using this exact strategy, but the example really holds. If he were, offering personal financial advising services, they get on the show, they have this great experience. Then he gives them some action steps, and he follows that up into a sales conversation, and maybe they become clients. And that's sort of the way that process can work. And it really does work best when you've got something that you can work on with them on the podcast. It's less good for other types of businesses, but if you've got that sort of thing you can demonstrate, it's great for design, great for any kind of coaching, any kind of personal development. It works really well for. And that, if you can get people who are willing to talk with you on the podcast about it, that can really elegantly become a sales funnel.
Well, and what I love about that too is, of course, you're going to get the person who is willing to share, but I suspect that 10 other people who are listening to them are absolutely going to relate to whatever the example is that y'all are working on together. Yeah. And then look, there's even more leads potentially.
I'm good with my money, and I bought Buddy's course. It's really because I really liked what he was doing. And I wanted to check to make sure I was doing everything he recommended.
I love it.
It works.
And y'all, she has 15 more of those. So.
Yeah, and that's just one. There's another 14. So
oh my gosh, I cannot wait to read this book. It's going to be so good, because obviously we turned this into a podcast, but I am sure that we're not utilizing it to its full capability. And even you and I had a little conversation on what that could even look like for this podcast and how we're using it, and, really getting super clear. So this is very, very exciting. I love it. So by the way, y'all, if you have any questions along these lines, please let us know. I know that there's some OBMs that I have been chatting with recently who specifically want to niche down into helping CEOs create their podcast, strategize their podcast, guest on podcasts, like all of these different things. So I'm sure you have questions. Here's your time with the expert.
And I'll just say on that point, if I may, people like me who run production companies love people like OBMs who are really well organized, so that we don't have to deal with the talent. But I don't love hosts. I love many of them, but it's really nice sometimes to have somebody who is managing the process, who's going to be more easy to access, who's going to have better access to information, can be quicker to get in touch with. So that can be really powerful when you are managing a third-party service provider. It can be just a beautiful relationship.
Did you hear that, Natalie? Natalie has been trying to pry, is our OBM, by the way. She has been trying to pry this process out of my hands since she started. And Leah, since we started this podcast, has been trying to. And we're just now starting. I think we have our first call about it next week. So yes, I can absolutely.
Business owners are busy. They don't always have time for the details. Like, they've got to be the talent. And that takes its own amount of energy. And sometimes having someone else play interference can be really helpful for everybody.
Oh my gosh, that's so funny because literally Megan had to follow up with me and be like, "Hey, do we have details for tomorrow?" And I'm like, "Oh my god, I forgot to say blah 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 blah." And then there's Natalie like slacking me, "Hey, Ashley, we can automate all of this." I'm like, "Okay, okay, okay." So yes, yes, help is on the way. Help is on the way. Amazing. So I suspect this is going to fall into what you were saying before, but I'm going to ask it because this is the way that I think OBMs think about
Mhm.
um, podcasts and starting a podcast or guests or like investing in guesting in
Yep.
podcasts. How do you, how can an OBM be confident that it is the right strategic investment for their clients versus meta ads
Yep.
versus sponsoring a group. I don't know. Anything else that's out there.
Yeah, and it's a really good thing to be asking at the beginning of this type of project. And I'm deeply sorry to say you can never be 100% sure for
Sure.
sure. Like you've got to test things out. But when you start from a foundation of this is what the business needs, and it's not we should have a podcast, or it's like let's do a podcast and see how we can make it work. It's no, the business needs more clients. And if you know that you've got a really high relationship trust driven sales process, great. Podcasting is going to get you in front of the people that you need. Or if you've got other goals like for your business, that is, you do need to get your IP out there in a more substantive way. Podcasting does create a body of work that's going to be evergreen and that is getting more and more popular. It's going to be a longer term strategy, but really thinking about what does the business need? Can a podcast fulfill that need? If the answer is yes, then it's worth the experiment to try. And plan to try for at least 6 months to a year. Podcasting doesn't often, and that's when you'll start to see traction. Having the expectation that this is a longer term game plan than some other strategies is a good thing to do. That's the thinking you want to be doing at the outset, because there are some things that a podcast isn't going to be super helpful with. Like it can be argued, and I've got friends and colleagues who argue every business should have a podcast. And I think, if you're a brand new business, no, you should not have a podcast. You've got a business to set up and systems to build. Like it's not a great time to do those things at the same time, in my opinion. But if if you do have like a really great community and you want to get more people into it, you can use a podcast as a tool for that and make it a cycle of having people from the community be on the podcast and demonstrate what paid members get. Like there's tons of ways you can do it, but it absolutely has to be something that a podcast is capable of doing. It's not going to build a business for you. It's going to enhance what you've already got going on. So that's where I would start.
I love it. So, of all of either examples you have seen or clients that you have had, what are some of like out of the box or creative ways that you have seen people use podcasts that aren't so obvious?
Oh, I have so many of these. I'll start with my very, very favorite. And it's that this was it was for a financial services firm. It was a wealth manager, and the client was the host, and he was a partner at the firm. And he just he had conversations with past clients, with other kind of industry experts that people would know about. He did a lot of solo episodes talking about the news, things that were making an impact, stories about stuff that he'd done for his clients. And this show was by the downloads, tiny, insignificant, never cracked, I think, 250 downloads a month. But those episodes were all being deployed by his sales team. So when somebody reached out and was like, hey, tell me about this. Oh, you'll be working with this guy. Listen to these 2 episodes about these cool things he did for people just like you. And so then his sales conversation started changing from tell me why you're so great to I want what you did for that guy. Can we start? Like, massive change to the cash flow from a tiny, tiny podcast, just really strategically and intelligently deployed.
Wow. So he
Love
brought
that.
on and basically did his own case studies.
He did his own case studies, and honestly, he stopped podcasting after about a year because he just had all the content that he needed, and he's just like, I'm good. I can take this like 2 hours back from my week because
Imagine.
I'm good. And it's like that's cool. Podcasts don't have to live forever. Like they can be something that you do to achieve a specific purpose. Like you can do a season of 10 episodes, and if that does the job you need it to do, successful podcast.
Wow, I never thought about that either. Like that it doesn't have to be this ongoing thing because it's going to lead me into my next question. I think with the rise of social media has given us, or just data in general, I don't really know, this vanity metric overload.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And what metrics are actually important versus a vanity, for lack of better terms.
Yeah. So like a metric that matters is one that gives you information about how well it's performing in your business. So that might mean more sales, more referral partners, actual referrals that you've gotten. It might be your SEO rankings for the different things that you're looking at. It might be the time that you spend on customer service. You can alter that up and down with a podcast. These are all things you can track that actually make a material difference to the profitability of your business. Whereas something like downloads, downloads by themselves don't tell you much. If my show tomorrow got 10,000 downloads, that wouldn't mean anything to me because my shit, like, it doesn't matter. A time when downloads might be useful is if, say, you've got a conversion podcast where everyone who listens is being really strongly urged to, like, say, get the premium version of the podcast, or you've got sponsors. Well, then you know that if I get 10,000 downloads, well, that's going to mean a nice extra chunk of money in my account this month. That's when download matters because there's a material difference in the business.
I'm so glad you brought up sponsors, and I can't believe that has slipped my mind. I feel like people are so eager to get sponsors on because they feel like that is the only way to monetize their podcast. I saw your eye roll for everyone who's listening to the podcast. So Megan, tell us how you really feel about sponsors.
I've got a whole thing about sponsors sponsors have an important role in the podcast industry. I don't want to talk down about them at all, but for most businesses, and I'm saying businesses that have products and services that they sell, you're going to invest a bunch of time, a bunch of money, a lot of your energy, room on your promotional calendar. You're going to learn new skills. You're going to ask the attention of your audience to pay attention to you on your podcast instead of, say, a sales page. You're going to do all of that. And then you're going to sell that audience to a mattress company for 45 cents on the dollar. Does that make sense? No, you have products and services. Your business is the monetization. So, it really, I find it very frustrating when someone says, I need to get a sponsor to cover the cost of production. And I mean, I understand that because it can be expensive to have like really good, it can cost a lot of money and take a lot of time, but a sponsor is very rarely, for most shows, unless you're getting into that top 10% of downloads category, you're not going to make significant income from sponsorships, at least not through most of the traditional marketplaces. You might be able to negotiate like better deals with people that you know or companies that you have a really great match. But even so, a great deal might be for $1,000 a month. Maybe that covers your production. That's great. But every time someone heard a sponsor ad is a time they didn't hear about your new flagship signature offering.
Bingo.
And so
right there,
that is sharing that attention. You're putting in all of this work. You should be getting the benefit of doing the work as the business owner.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Oh, man, I'm so glad you said that.
And I would like to say, like, there are times when sponsorships are great. If you've got like a nonprofit, for example, and you're podcasting and support that, sponsors can be a huge way to because then you're not spending your own money or nonprofit money on the production. A sponsor is that's a great use. If you're an influencer, journalist, a main content marketer, there are times sponsorship really makes sense. But for most businesses, especially most service-based businesses, it's just nonsensical.
Yeah. Oh, I'm so glad. And there is nothing that I hate more when I'm listening to a podcast. And yeah, sure, it might be a big one, but like I am the target audience, and what they're offering, to your point, mattresses, is just so off brand. I'm like, what?
I saw a comic once, I think it was, and it's just like, I need new socks, but I'm not sure which of my favorite podcasters I want to support with their affiliate link. And it's like,
that is exactly right. I was listening to one the other day, and it's a comedian, and it was, at first she goes into like how healthy she is, like in the actual content, and then the commercial was Mountain Dew, and I'm like, what? What? Huh?
I think if you have a bigger show and there's not like a direct revenue tie from your podcast to other businesses, then you do go the sponsor route. Like, it can be done well. Like, I've heard great sponsor ads and reads. I think there was one, it was for a type of bra, and the host, it worked it in so naturally into the conversation. I was just like, that was beautiful. That was
And guess who has 3 third love or love bras? This girl, because I heard about it on a podcast.
so it can be done well,
Totally.
plainly, and does work it's if you have a business, considering being a sponsor on other podcasts can be a really great strategy because brand recall is great
Oh.
in from advertisers to listeners. So that could be something to consider as well.
Oh, that's true too. Oh, interesting. We did get a question, and I want to make sure that we answer it. Holly asks, "Can you tell me how a sponsor works
Absolutely.
in a podcast?"
There's a couple of different kinds of sponsor. So one of the most common is that when you upload your audio to the podcast host, you can put little digital markers in different places, either right at the beginning or say in the middle. It's like, we'll be back after a word from our sponsors. And then you enter into a marketplace, and the podcast host or other sponsors will kind of basically choose. They're going to buy a little bit of time on your podcast, and you'll get paid based on how many times it's downloaded. So that's kind of traditional marketplace sponsorship. You can also have other types of sponsorship where you negotiate a deal personally, either through like an agency or by knocking on doors and say, I'm going to, I'd love for you to be my sponsor for 3 months. I'll give you a host read ad. We'll run it in every episode for 3 months, or we'll run it until you've had X number of downloads. All of the different marketplaces and the different hosts have slightly different systems and ways of arranging them. There's an alarming lack of consistency in the podcast industry about everything. Don't get me started on the vocabulary, but that's essentially how it works. And for a newer show, I'd always recommend trying to get a sweetheart sponsorship deal. So if you do want to go that route, and it's negotiate personally with a company that you know or a brand that you like, and say, hey, I'll do these reads on my podcast. It's brand new, exclusive offer. You're the first. You're great. You're also going to get your logo on the website and the podcast page. I'll put a link in the notes. A lot of sponsorships don't include that, so you can negotiate a higher deal by approaching people directly and adding more of your total marketing collateral to the pod.
Love it. Very interesting. I love how creative you can get with this,
You can get so creative. Like, you can, if you want to have like room for sponsors, maybe that's your goal for, in 3 years, structure your podcast now to have sponsors and just talk about, other business owners you like, a charity you support. You can do anything. You can even sign up for affiliate programs for other services that you use. Make your own ads. Nothing's stopping you from doing that.
That's true. I didn't think about that either. How does have you seen it work? And obviously there's no money exchanged, but have you seen it work where you are doing ads for your own services? So
Oh,
not
yeah.
even weaved in, like not eloquently, but if we were to stop this right now and it'd be like, hey, do you want to be an OBM? We could do training and OBMU. Like, does that work?
Totally. It absolutely does. So we do this actually for a couple of our client shows that have training programs specifically or services. And so you do your little transitional moment in the podcast. So right now you say it's like, we'll be right back after this important vital message that you must hear. And then we pre-produce an ad so that it's done separately. And we use that exact same functionality within the podcast host to be like, okay, from this date to this date, play this ad where there's the little marker in the episode. It's going to pop it in, and it can be replaced later as needed.
I dig that. Huh, that's interesting. That's a cool way of because I struggle with podcasts for this, what I'm about to say. I love to give value, give value, give value, give value. And I also realize that people who are listening may have no idea what you actually sell. Or
Yep.
like may have no idea that they can get more of whatever it is that you are offering that is tailored to their exact need or exactly what they want. So that could be a really good way of just being quick and intentional on sharing your offer.
It can be a great way. And so it depends on the different podcast hosts that you work with. Some have different functionality, like some don't have like mid-roll, so you can't put something in the middle of an episode, but you can the beginning and end. Others you can get really, really specific about, I want, say if you were giving a speech, Ashley, you were talking in Dallas, let's say, and you wanted people who are in Texas, but not the rest of the world to hear a specific ad. You can do that and have that message only go out to people who are in Dallas, who are in Texas. And everyone else could hear like your main offer. So you can get really, really discreet and really, really granular with how that's managed.
Wow. Okay. Amazing.
Sometimes I'm amazed by how well it's targeted. Like I live in Quebec. And even though, so I'm an English speaker primarily, but sometimes I'll hear an ad on my American podcast that I listen to, like today, explain the example I gave earlier, and it's for comme Le Société d'alcool de Québec in French in my ear while I'm walking, listening to this thing about American politics, and it's like here's your really hyper specific French Canadian ad.
Oh, that is, I mean, it's like, of course that is possible, but when you
Yeah,
think about it, you're like, wow.
yeah. It was
Oh,
the first time I heard it, I was just like, wait, what? Okay, yeah, okay, I've
oh.
been really well targeted.
Bravo, Today Explained. Bravo, bravo. Oh, I love it. Um, so, mm, ha so let's talk about guesting real quick.
Yeah.
Do you focus on, like, what you offer to clients? Do you focus on the production or guesting or both or strategy? What is your gamut?
Yeah, so what we do is we mainly do production. So we design shows,
Okay.
we produce them every week. We write show notes, we create graphics, we schedule stuff. We kind of take over the business area of the podcast on the production end, and we also, if someone has a producer that they are happy with, we can help train on getting the right stats, analyzing and understanding that data, episode feedback, strategy, all that kind of good stuff. Those are the main areas that we work in. So we don't do guest placements. There are great agencies that do. Um, but a guesting strategy can work for a lot of businesses, and for a lot of businesses it's a great first step, or it's great to do in conjunction with having your own podcast, because when you are a guest you're getting access to somebody else's audience instead of having to build your own. And there can be very good reasons to build your own and to invest, in building those structures, but you will find, if you have podcasted, getting people to listen to it is really hard.
Yeah.
And one of the best ways to do it is to be a guest on other people's shows, because it's much easier for someone to hear a great interview with someone who's like, oh, I like that person, I'm going to click, add their show to my subscription list, than to find a stranger and teach them how to use iTunes. Like, it's just, it's much easier. And so the more you guest, the more people will come back to your show. If again, downloads are important, which they are not for every business.
Right.
But if you need traffic, if you
Mhm,
need attention, be a
mhm,
Guest. If
mhm.
you need, and you can do a lot of the same strategies that I recommend you do as a host, as a guest, to the extent that the hosts who have you on their show allow. So you can make your offers, you can do other things like that. But yeah, so it's really two different purposes, but they work beautifully together. And if you are going to start a podcast, um, it's really a good idea to guest for a couple of months first. See what other people's systems are like. See how
Mm,
communicative they are. See what kind of assets they provide. And that'll give you a really good sense of give you some ideas for what you want to do, how you want to structure your guest relationships, and you'll see if you like it. Maybe you'll get on an interview with someone and you're just like, well, that sucked, and I never want to do it again. You can podcast and hate it. It happens sometimes. So it's
yeah.
a really nice way to test the waters.
Oh, that's yeah. So, do you have any examples of a guest maybe that you were either working with one of your clients or just seen out in the open who had a really good experience or really great way of converting from, "Hey, I am a guest," sending them the audience to their, I don't know, freebie or whatever it was. Have you seen something like that really work?
Yeah. So uh, often people will, especially in the business podcast community, there's very often an expectation that, hey, at the end of the episode, you're going to get a chance to tell the audience where they can get something really cool. So if there's a really good match between the audience and the guest, then you can get a great number of people joining your list or kind of joining your community that way. Um, Pro tip: if you are a very frequent guest, create a separate landing page for every show that you're on, so you can really clearly track which shows generate the most new business and the most new opt-ins. Super great strategy. If you are a regular guest, if you guest once in a while, I wouldn't worry about it. But like, if you want that clarity, because that'll tell you, hey, I need to get back on that show. I need a better, closer referral relationship with this person. It can really give you a lot of information about how well your audiences are aligned. Other
Oh,
things I've seen work really, really well is this is really fun too. If you've got like podcasting friends, do a feed drop, do a feed swap, and you take an episode of theirs, record a new intro to explain what's going on, play it on your feed, and they'll do the same with one of yours. A lot of networks do this when they're launching a new show. Is that they'll have you've heard this on if you listen
yeah,
to like Wondery does this all the
yeah,
time.
yeah,
When there's a new show, it's on like your regular listen,
totally.
and that's how I've gotten probably 50% of the new shows that I listen to was from hearing an example.
Yeah,
So that can be another really good thing to do, especially if you want that audience growth.
right. Oh, I love it. I love it. I love it. All right, y'all. Any other questions? Please put into chat. Um, what has been the biggest pitfall, downfall, mistake that people have made when starting a podcast or doing a podcast or guesting? What would you say? I love that you just gave us a pro tip. So I'm trying to think of like what other landmines are out there that we should
Mm.
know about um in the
See some
podcast.
yes, some landmines that you might run into if you are a frequent guest. You are going to learn how rare it actually is for a host to let you know that your episode is live. So, as a host, make sure to make it very easy for your guest to share and talk about it and contribute to the promotion of the episode. Not everyone will, often for very perfectly legitimate reasons, but like don't make them search your feed for when the episode is going live.
Natalie, can you please add this to the automation because we do a terrible job at that. Thank you.
I did not mean to call you out.
No. It was helpful. I'm an open book. Look, we all make mistakes. We can always be better. Please don't. No. It
I
actually
think
was a great reminder of something I should be doing.
I think another really big pitfall is trying to do too much with one show. And this is because there's so much that you can do with podcasting. You want to, and because it's gonna be kind of expensive and it's gonna take a lot of your time, even if you've got a great support. It's not a fast, easy, cheap project. So it's really tempting to try and get absolutely everything that you can out of it when you split your focus. And when you're trying to get a whole bunch of things, you're going to just ultimately achieve less. So I very frequently recommend, start with audio only. If you want to add video, get good at doing audio first, then add video. And that's, and things like that, is if you are a relationship building show, great, focus on building relationships. Don't even think about the other stuff. Don't worry about your promotions. Don't worry about your audience numbers. Don't worry about downloads. Focus on the guest relationships that you're building and follow up with them. Oh my goodness. Like, I've got this relationship building show, but I don't have any new business. I don't have any referrals. Well, cool. Have you followed them on all social media accounts? When's the last time you talked to them? What have you done for them lately? It's
What
work.
are some things? What are some things that you have seen work well? Like when following up, because I don't want to be like, oh, hey, it's been a while. How are you doing? Like what else?
Yeah. So for that, you as much as you can work something into that initial conversation, the better. For a relationship building show, I recommend doing a prep call, so that you can have a conversation about what you're going to talk about. And stuff always comes up in the pre-show and the post-show, where you talk about, you share ideas. So follow up on those. It's like, hey, you had that great idea about this. Why don't we collab on this article together? And so like, just keep kind of a running list of who this person is, how can we work together, and be generous. Share their stuff, get on their email list, be the audience member and partner that you would like to have in the world, and track everything religiously so over time. Okay, so subscribing for their newsletters doesn't seem to have an impact, but boy, promoting their content on LinkedIn really makes we have better conversations after that. So you'll learn over time what has the highest value return for your industry and for your business. And I think that's probably one of the big ones.
Oh no, that was perfect. Thank you. That's exactly what I was looking for. Question from Angela: how can you increase your audience but keep it to the right people?
Okay, so the first one is, for what purpose are you increasing the audience? And you need to have a very good answer to that question before you invest any brain space on it. So, so if you do have a really good reason to increase your audience, one of the best ways to do it is just I wish I had a better answer for you than the brutal reality of one-to-one messages and the difficult labor of actually finding people you think would benefit and telling them personally that they should listen to an episode. That's the best way to do it, is people listen to podcasts based on personal recommendations. So you got to do it if you want to grow your audience. But again, a lot of podcasts don't need that audience to grow, really, because the benefit is in the content that they're creating, or it's in the relationship that they're having with guests. So it's going to be a lot of work. Make sure it's really worth it.
I love that you said that. That is yep. Underscore.
Yep.
Very, very, very true.
It's not just that you got to brute force it.
Yeah. I mean, and that's business. Like when you're starting anything, like that's how Prowess started. I mean, we hand emailed lots of people to see if they'll give us 20 minutes of their time. Yes. I think this is going to be the last question, given our time. So, okay. Jenna asks, where can you find download metrics? And besides downloads, is there a way to tell how popular a podcast is? Looking for ways to qualify whether a podcast appearance would be worth a CEO's time.
Ooh, okay. Lots of great stuff there. There is no free public way to find out how many downloads a show has. You can pay for that information. So I've got an account with a company called Podchaser, and they have, and it's $2,000 a year, I think, for their kind of data. But that gives you a look at the downloads a show has, its reach, where in the world, contact information, past sponsors, that kind of thing. So for some businesses, worthwhile to have. And if you're setting up like a podcast focused OBM business, maybe a very worthwhile investment for you. But some of the other questions you should be asking around that is, because there definitely is a habit in some industries, and it's like, oh yeah, my guest won't even talk to you unless you have this number of downloads or that. And it's like, cool, fair choice. You're the boss of your podcast. You can do whatever you want, or, you're the guest. You can spend your time however you want it. If your goal as a guest or as a host is building relationships with other guests and hosts, then maybe that doesn't matter so much. If it is making sure that you've got lots of backlinks coming back to your site, well, then maybe the size doesn't matter so much. So again, downloads can matter, but you might be missing out on a huge, like a great relationship with someone who's newer in their business, has a newer podcast, or has a really highly niched audience. So, really consider whether that's a decision-making criteria or not for the goals that you have as a business owner.
Wow. I cannot wait to read this book. Truly. And can we put the link for Megan's book? We'll put it in the show notes too. But I know I have it right here. There we go. Megan, thank you. Everyone, go check out this book. Where else can people find you? Anything else you want to leave people with? This has been amazing.
Oh, I'm so glad. This is fun. I enjoyed this conversation so much. You had great questions from the audience. So thank you for having me and creating this space for us to have this conversation. I'm pretty active on LinkedIn. So if you want to connect with me there, I'm always happy to say hi. If you've got an idea for a podcast or a client, I'd love to chat about it with you. And pretty much everything that we do is at podcastingforbusiness.com, including contact forms that go right to my inbox. So don't be shy.
I love it. Also, great URL. I am learning a lot about SEO in the AI world, and
best URL. I've got a bit of a problem. Like, I've given up most of my vices from my younger years, but I still cannot resist a good domain. When I see, I have an embarrassment of domains, but this is the best one that I've ever gotten.
You dirty dog, you domain. I love it. Oh, so good. I've been known to collect domains as well. So as a fellow domain advisor, I understand.
It's not a real idea until you bought the domain. That's rule for life.
So So good. Megan, thank you, thank you, thank you. I'll be honest, I got distracted with your advice. Did you tell people? Oh yeah, LinkedIn.
LinkedIn's the best way to get it.
Amazing. Y'all, I will see you this time next week, laughing just as much, hopefully, but maybe not. Megan, again, thank you, thank you, thank you,
Thank you.
and congrats on the book.
Thank you.